we've reversed metabolic syndrome, for instance, in people with metabolic syndrome. In one of our clinical trials, we showed, I think it was significant changes in 20 of 21 measured outcomes. We've likewise, the trial has shown improvements on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, one of these other lifestyle, induced elements like pre-diabetic states, NAFLD, and metabolic syndrome. We've shown weight loss in 4 different studies. And again, all of those populations were overweight. We've shown improvements in brain metabolism in 4 different study groups.
Hey, this is Ari. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. With me today is Alex Tarnava, who is one of the top experts in the world and is heavily involved in research and working with researchers in the field of molecular hydrogen, which has become one of my absolute favorite go-to supplements, must-have daily supplements in my personal routine. And I would say for my wife and even my kids are asking for this now. This is a wonderful supplement with lots and lots of benefits. It's something, as you'll hear in the podcast, something I was skeptical of for many years as I would see bits and pieces of the research. And I was kind of thinking, this is gimmicky, this is BS. And I have since become convinced as I've explored the research in much greater depth and tried it and really tested this out. It has real benefits, it's unquestionable, and it's proven by lots and lots of studies at this point. So this is something that I've been so convinced about that I felt I needed to bring this to the market under my brand. So it has become my newest supplement in my own personal line of supplements. That's how strongly I feel about this. And as you'll hear in this podcast with Alex, it is just amazing as far as the extent of all the different benefits that have been shown in the research. So with no further ado, enjoy this podcast with Alex Tarnava. Alex, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Okay, so let me start off by saying I have been aware of hydrogen tablets for many, many years. Maybe 10-ish years at this point is when I first started seeing some of the studies on this. And to be honest, I was very skeptical. I thought, oh, this kind of sounds hokey. Maybe this is more like some of this clustered water, structured water stuff that never really pans out, the alkaline water stuff. And I was seeing hydrogen water. Like, okay, what does that even mean? I mean, water is already H2O. There's already a lot of hydrogen in there. What is this hydrogen stuff all about? Then I, over the years, started seeing more and more studies. And eventually I got curious enough that I wanted to really look into it. And eventually I got curious enough once I saw so much positive research to actually start trying it. And then when I noticed benefits from it, and in general, I should say the vast majority of supplements you don't notice, and certainly I don't notice any benefits from, where you can actually feel and discern subjectively, okay, this is clearly a benefit. This is not just the placebo effect, because most of the supplements I try, I'm trying with skepticism. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not going into it as a believer thinking, oh, this is going to be an amazing magic pill. So I'm very, after 20 plus years of taking tens of thousands of dollars of supplements, I'm very used to being able to discern placebo effect from actual effect. And the majority of supplements, as I said, don't have actual effects that you can subjectively feel. This one did. And so I became very impressed with it. I started buying it for my friends and family, asking them to try it and seeing what benefits they notice. And I became more and more impressed with it, enough to the point where I found you and now have my own molecular hydrogen tablets that you are the inventor of, that I'm selling under my brand at this point. So that's how impressed I've been with this, but it's been a 10-year process. So let me start by asking you, what is hydrogen? What is this hydrogen water stuff all about?
Sure. And I'll just comment. I mean, your skepticism is well founded. There's no shortage of magic waters and, bogus claims and scams regarding water. The important thing to realize is the water part, the water is just a delivery to get the hydrogen gas, right? So hydrogen water is water that has H2 gas dissolved into it. Now think of it like sparkling water, but instead of the CO2, the carbonation is hydrogen. right? And the reason that we dissolve hydrogen in water is because by getting it in the water gets it into our gut to interact with our microbiome and gets it to our liver. And this is really important because you can also inhale hydrogen gas, but it's shown to have different, pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. It goes to different tissues in different ways. So inhaling the gas can be really good for some instances, but some of the most important benefits that we get from hydrogen gas, it has to get to our internal organs in our gut, which inhaling doesn't do. So that's one of the most important things to know, and why we're putting it in the water and delivering it via water. And it's just an effective delivery method to get the gas itself into our gut and our internal organs. Um, Now, why hydrogen is important, we have to go to the very beginning, before even mitochondria, to understand this. So our mitochondria evolved from something called eukaryotes, right? Those first eukaryotes actually expelled hydrogen gas as a waste product. Before that, the eukaryotes formed as a symbiotic relationship between two organelle. One was a bacteria that actually consumed hydrogen as its fuel. So hydrogen has been with us, been with our mitochondria since before mitochondria even existed. Now, throughout the last, couple billion years, there has been vastly different levels of hydrogen gas in the atmosphere and in the water. For instance, the oldest water that has ever been found deep beneath the Canadian Shield still has detectable levels of hydrogen gas in it. Now, none of the water on the planet does anymore, unless there's some thermal venting going on that gets the hydrogen there. So that's another interesting anecdote. But the most important thing about why we're deficient in hydrogen and why it's important to take exogenously is throughout all of human evolution, we would have consumed well over 100 grams of fiber per day. Now, we produce hydrogen gas endogenously by fermenting fiber. Today, the average person gets 14 grams of fiber a day. So we're getting a fraction of the fiber needed to produce H2 endogenously to get to our internal organs as we have throughout all of evolution. But what makes matters worse is because of these lifestyle changes, our microbiome has drastically changed. Right. So when we actually do hydrogen breath tests, we give someone a fiber like lactulose and do a hydrogen breath test. Research indicates that upwards between 60 to 80% of people, depending on the study, especially those who are middle-aged and overweight, produce no hydrogen gas at all.
Wow.
They're fermenting the fiber and producing methane.
Repeat
So
that again, especially which demographic of people?
middle-aged, overweight.
Okay.
Middle age and older and overweight. If you're hitting your 30s and you're overweight, you may not produce any hydrogen even when you get fiber.
So
Right?
yeah, even if they take the fiber, they're still not producing it because I would
Their
imagine there's
microbiome
dysbiosis in the
has
gut, so they don't have those hydrogen producing species in abundant enough numbers.
exactly, because a healthy microbiome relies on this ebb and flow of H2. A lot of the bacteria produces hydrogen through this, fermenting fiber, and other bacteria is consuming hydrogen. So this dysbiosis can go either ways. Some people can get sick because they're just producing crazy amounts of hydrogen all the time, way more than you could ever take, as a supplement. Other people produce no hydrogen at all. Now, what we're learning about hydrogen is it plays some very, very important roles in the body. One, it's an adapted stressor. So similar to exercise, cold exposure, fasting, heat exposure, we've anticipated to expect these spikes of H2 in our cell. H2 saturates our cells and then goes down. It's basically kind of like exercise for our mitochondria, something called a mitohormetic factor. So it stresses out the cell for a very short amount of time. Our, our mitochondria gets stronger, it produces more mitochondria, to improve the performance of the mitochondria we already have, and it leads to positive cellular adaptations. So, for instance, hydrogen has shown to positively impact like over 10,000 gene expressions. It's shown positive impacts in every organ in the body across about 180 different, disease and non-disease models, through over 2,000 publications. And I think about 170 clinical trials to date. So the evidence is getting very, very strong. And if I could boil down what hydrogen seems to do the best, it seems to be our master regulator for stress response. So, for instance, most of the research, a lot of the research, a lot of the marketing talks about hydrogen as like, an antioxidant and an anti-inflammatory, but it isn't.
Mhm.
It regulates our production of antioxidants and also beneficial pro-oxidative and nitrogen stressors. This leads to something called redox homeostasis. It's the harmony between, our oxidative stress and our antioxidants, because you can go into reductive stress too by too many antioxidants, right? And that's just as harmful as oxidative stress.
Okay,
So,
so this is a good entry point. You're addressing a lot of stuff that I intended to ask you about. So you're kind of
okay.
jumping ahead of how I intended this to go, but it's great. So let's come back. Let's circle back to some of these ideas that you just mentioned with some additional layers and additional framing. So number one, I want to touch on this evolutionary lens. This is incredibly important in my view. Human health can only be properly understood in an evolutionary context. Everybody who's trying to look at human health, even if you've got a mountain of knowledge of biochemistry and all the intricate mechanisms of this does what and has this and this effect, in my opinion, it's people fumbling in the dark, tinkering with a system they don't understand, unless you are understanding things through an evolutionary lens. And this is why, as a just a simple fact, over decades, we've invested trillions of dollars to the world's smartest medical scientists, pharmaceutical scientists, to develop molecules, to synthesize synthetic chemicals that are designed to target disease. And we have a mountain of research on all the mechanisms of all these specific diseases, from atherosclerosis to stroke to fatty liver to dementia and Alzheimer's to diabetes. We've synthesized millions of synthetic chemicals that are designed with the explicit intention to target these mechanisms of diseases, 19,000 of which have been gone on to full FDA approval. And somehow, despite decades and trillions of dollars by all the world's medical and pharmaceutical scientists, we don't have a single drug in existence. Of all those millions of drug candidates and 19,000 that have been approved, not a single one has been proven such that you can give it to a healthy human being and it will reliably make them healthier, such that it will extend their lifespan and the benefits of that drug will outweigh the harms. We don't have one drug that fits that. So the reason why, in my view, is because we are trying to synthesize drugs outside of the context of any sort of evolutionary paradigm. We're not looking at human health and disease prevention through an evolutionary lens where we're doing things that are compatible with human biology and our evolutionary design. So, we have decades of all this knowledge, yet exercise is a vastly more powerful disease preventative drug than any of those 19,000 drugs, right? So my point here is evolutionary context is the only intelligent way to look at human health. So with that said, I love that you brought in this question, because you remember in our first conversation on the phone, this is what I asked you. Help me understand how taking this hydrogen stuff makes any kind of evolutionary sense, because that's how I filter stuff through. If it doesn't make evolutionary sense, it's probably not going to turn out to be beneficial, and it's probably going to turn out to have side effects that are really undesirable. So that's why this evolutionary lens matters. Now, you brought in this evolutionary lens right at the beginning of this conversation, saying hydrogen is natural. This is natural to our species. We're designed to get this stuff. Not only are we designed to get it externally from our environment, but we're designed to produce it internally.
And we're getting neither now,
Right.
for the most part.
And
But
now
we're
we're in
vastly
this.
less internally and non-externally.
Exactly. And even from this evolutionary paradigm, okay, now if we know that it's supposed to be produced by our microbiome, we can go, okay, well then we just need to eat more fiber. That's really addressing the root cause. But there's this huge subset of people, a majority of the population, that it's I think it's around 70 or 80% of the population that's either overweight or obese.
Yeah.
And and then as a result of that is going to have dysbiosis of their gut. And now we have the majority of the population that has a deficiency in hydrogen as a result of not being able to produce enough internally.
I
So
want to point out, and I want to point out too that it might not be easy to solve this just by upping your fiber. And I consume between 50 to 70 grams of fiber per day, right? The more I've learned about this over the years, I didn't used to, right? Until I started learning about how we evolved with fiber and how important it was. With my knowledge and a plan to slowly increase my fiber, I was still sick for 2 to 3 months before my body got used to that kind of fiber
mm,
intake. Most people are not going to go through that. They're not going to go through stabbing pains in their stomach and fatigue and all sorts of things by rapidly increasing the fiber over a few month period of time. Um, I'm glad I did. It cured a lot of the issues I had with my gut, which is a big reason I got into hydrogen in the first place, because of basically a mystery illness that happened and ended up with all these health issues. I had some sort of a mystery virus, put on heavy NSAIDs, which gave me ulcers, and I basically had to stop competing in sports and just wreaked havoc on my body. So all the drugs that I'd been given to repair my stomach did not work, did not help at all. But by hydrogen was helping a little bit, and then by increasing fiber, I basically cured it with that one too, right, in a few months. But it was a few months of hell, I want to
mhm,
put it. To scale from 10, 15 grams of fiber a day to 70,
mhm.
that is heavy.
Yeah. Okay. So there's um, there's another. Well, actually, maybe we'll circle back to this question of antioxidants and the mechanisms by which it works. Let's go deeper into the benefits side of hydrogen. So, one of the things that you did after we spoke for the first time is you sent me a document with links to a lot of studies, including some that haven't even yet been published, and on all these amazing different benefits of hydrogen. And I mean, it's really astounding when you actually look at what this stuff can do to human health, which is again why I went in and created my own supplement, which you're the inventor of those tablets. Um, it's truly impressive. So give people a rundown of what the benefits are, how they should think of like what this stuff is doing in their body in terms of practical benefits, not mechanisms, but on a
Yeah.
real world practical level, what am I going to get if I take this supplement?
So it really depends on the person, right? And hydrogen, you can call it kind of like a smart molecule because it seems to regulate our response to stress. And there's all sorts of varying stress. So, for instance, if you put a hydrogen rich medium on a completely healthy cell, you observe no changes. Now, if you artificially damage that cell, then you see all these protective effects coming into play to reverse the damage. And what changes depends on what type of damage you introduce. So, for instance, we in our clinical research, and these are some of our claims that we can make, we have something called a CARS report, which is careful and reliable scientific evidence. And it was done by four independent expert professors in the field who reviewed all of our direct evidence and all the supporting evidence and issued these 21 claims, which is massive. But we've reversed metabolic syndrome, for instance, in people with metabolic syndrome. In one of our clinical trials, we showed, I think it was significant changes in 20 of 21 measured outcomes. We've likewise, you know, the trial has shown improvements on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, one of these other lifestyle, induced elements like pre-diabetic states, NAFLD, and metabolic syndrome. We've shown weight loss in four different studies. But again, all of those populations were overweight. We've shown improvements in brain metabolism in four different study groups. So we showed improvements in brain metabolism in the elderly, and we saw actually a lot of cool changes in the elderly. So in the elderly population, we also saw this was a 70 plus population, 6 months, double-blind placebo-controlled study. We lengthened telomeres, we improved DNA methylation, we doubled this protein in the blood called TET2. So TET2, TET2 has been linked to young blood. Some listeners that have seen the vampire research in mice, where you take the blood of a young mouse and put it in an old mouse, and it reinvigorates the skeletal tissue. That's linked to TET2. Hydrogen doubled that. We improved the brain metabolism, like I mentioned. We improved some functional outcomes as well, like it improved their quality of life scores predominantly by reducing pain. It improved some sleep outcomes. And the biggest one, in my opinion, it improves some parameters of the senior fitness test. So, for instance, how many times the elderly people could sit and stand before getting tired actually went in the hydrogen group over 6 months. And
Mhm.
importantly, this trial was done in early stages of the pandemic. So these people were not going to the gym. The average age was like 77, yet they somehow were stronger and fitter at the end of the trial, where the placebo group, as expected, was less fit at the end of the trial.
Yeah.
So that was huge on the anti-aging study. It's a really cool study. But we've also shown more robust improvements in brain metabolism and equivalence in raising something called the attention network test in two separate studies after 24-hour sleep debt, head to head against caffeine. So hydrogen, sorry, my cat is knocking stuff off my table right now. People are hearing. So basically, hydrogen was equivalent to caffeine in improving the attention network test, but they affected different domains of attention. Caffeine predominantly affects something called alerting, and hydrogen was shown to predominantly affect something called orienting. And this gets into the experiential difference because hydrogen isn't, you know,
A stimulant.
it's not a stimulant, right? Um, when you take it when you're really tired, say you're jet lagged or you indulged the night before, or didn't get enough sleep, you get clarity. So you don't feel high and jittery and full of energy. You just feel normal. Again, it normalizes you, which again brings us back to how hydrogen kind of regulates our response to stress and brings us back to harmony, brings us back to homeostasis. So that was interesting. And the professors ended up doing a second study, which was four groups, right? So it was placebo, placebo, caffeine, placebo, hydrogen plus placebo, or hydrogen and caffeine. And it found that hydrogen actually had a more robust effect and improvement on brain metabolism than the caffeine did.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, and finally, we showed improvements in brain metabolism in a otherwise healthy, overweight population. So gave them more energy. And interesting on that, they did a secondary analysis on that study, uh, and found that the hydrogen regulated some of the brain chemistry involved with satiety, which could also be leading to the weight loss. But there's more to that study too. We saw improvements in gut health and improved short chain fatty acids and reduced calprotectin, so it improved gut health as well. Um, and I haven't even got into hydrogen has shown a lot of research, one of the biggest research areas on improving athletic performance. So we
Hmm.
talk about exercise, and this is one of the coolest things about hydrogen. And when I talked about how it isn't an antioxidant and it isn't an anti-inflammatory, that's great for exercise because you don't want to take antioxidants or anti-inflammatories in conjunction with exercise. It blunts the hypertrophy gains.
I
It
want to
blunts
I
the
want to
stress
I want to
response.
circle back to that and discuss this in depth, but go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
But with hydrogen, though, because it's regulating, our inflammatory response, and it's regulating the redox status within the cell. Some cool research has been done with rodents in forced swim tests. Basically, you'll have like one, group of rodents that are just doing the forced swim, and one group of rodents that get hydrogen plus the forced swim. Hydrogen group actually sees a higher spike in oxidative stress and inflammation than the just swimming group, but they return to homeostasis faster. Meaning, basically, it's as if the hydrogen group worked out harder but recovered quicker. So that's really profound, and that's why we've seen so many pro athletes turn to, you know, molecular hydrogen therapy, and we've seen so much research showing it improves performance. And with exercise, it's shown to have an anti-fatigue effect, so you can exercise for longer as well. Uh, then simultaneously, they say will measure the redox status of cells people after several days of intensive exercise, and the hydrogen group is healthier. It's recovered them from the stress faster. So it's not blunting the gains from exercise; it's actually potentiating them. But then you're recovering from that stress faster. And
Do you know when they administered hydrogen in that study that showed that the I think not the last one you mentioned, but the one prior to that?
I believe it was just before exercise.
Okay.
And I know most of the human clinical trials, it's anywhere from, 60 to 5 minutes before exercise is when they'll administer. I anecdotally suggest taking it about 10 minutes before.
Okay.
Um, Two reasons. One, the protective effects of hydrogen can last for up to 24 hours after you take it. However, the improvements in brain metabolism seems to only last a few hours,
Mhm.
right? So you want to take the H2 close when you're exercising. Uh, Otherwise, you might not get the full benefits of the energy and brain metabolism.
Mhm. Okay. There's been at least a couple studies on body composition. Can you speak to those as well, and what they found, and if you're aware of what mechanisms might be involved in improving body composition?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and we've shown this in 4 studies, but one other clinical trial, in addition to the ones on the tablets, showed the same thing. It was a relatively high dose. So one thing about the tablets is we were getting by far the highest concentration of H2. So the dose we're using in clinical research is far higher than other clinical trials. So we've tended to show much stronger benefits than other hydrogen water studies on the basis of hydrogen, like any other molecule, like exercise, like any adaptive stressor, works in a dose-dependent manner, right? And humans tend to consume far less water than other, mammals. Like for instance, a mouse consumes about 12 times the water that a human does in that we give in a clinical trial, especially because a lot of the water we consume is in juice or coffee or in our food and everything like that. Or is the mice in these studies are getting dry pellets and then drinking water,
Mhm.
right? So we've shown much stronger benefits, but one other study that used about half the dose we do saw some mild improvements in body comp also, but we've shown 4 studies with weight loss and body comp improvements. It could come down to the, improvements in satiety, but it also could come down to increased energy and well-being.
Mhm.
And in our metabolic syndrome study, um, actually some of the professors on that study were discussing how to report it, because they saw over a pound of weight loss a month on average with no other, changes other than participants kept journals. And only in the hydrogen water group, they noticed that the patients were becoming more active. They had picked up exercise routines that they hadn't had in 20, 30 years. They were going for nighttime walks. They were doing all these things. So some of the researchers are like, well, we should report this because this isn't a pharmacological effect, right? In hydrogen driving weight loss, even though there are some mechanisms that it might be at play. But others were saying, well, hydrogen is making these people feel better and healthier, so they're getting more active, which is exactly the story of hydrogen. As it's improving everything, as you feel better, you do more,
Mhm.
right? So in hydrogen, improving the brain metabolism, improving your energy, reversing stress that's going on, you don't feel as sick anymore. So you get out and you do more, which makes you even healthier and
Mhm.
compounds things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to speak to my own personal experience here. I'm already extremely energetic. I mean, I'm kind of overflowing with energy, and I'm constantly sort of exhausting the people around me. My 26-year-old nanny, who's also fit and energetic, is is always complaining how much I'm always like running everybody around, and how she wonders how much energy I have to be able to just constantly want to do stuff and be out and be physically active. So rarely is it the case that with anything, including with stimulants, that I notice much of an energy boost. Stimulants generally only just make me more anxious, if anything, or tense.
Jittery.
And I would say for me personally, I know lots of friends and my family, certainly my parents, have noticed energy boost by taking this. But for me personally, I don't notice much of an immediate energy boost. What I notice is number one, clarity of brain function, which you spoke to. And certainly that's the case. It's been very, very beneficial for me when I do hours and hours and hours, for example, writing my book that I'm working on right now. Sometimes I'll sit at my computer for 8 or 10 hours of the day writing. And once you get hours into it, sometimes you get a little foggy, and the hydrogen water perks me right back up and gives me that clarity to just keep going for hours and hours more than I would normally be able to. But probably the single biggest thing that I've noticed is um, being as physically active as I am. I do surfing, and I do weight training, and I play tennis, and I do jujitsu, and I do capoeira. And sometimes I might do, if I surf for 2.5 hours in the morning, I might do an hour weight training workout, and I might play tennis for an hour, hour and a half in the same day. And that is a lot of exercise in one day. And I just can't help myself. It's not that I think that much exercise is necessary for health. You can get away with, probably, if anything, I'm probably doing too much. It's just that I love doing these activities so much that I kind of can't help myself. I'm kind of like a little kid in that regard. But I do have a tendency to be on the edge of overdoing it. And what I notice is hydrogen allows me to recover much more quickly, and it doesn't give me the depression in energy levels that would normally
Yeah.
come with doing that much exercise. It doesn't come with the exhaustion. It kind of prevents that exhaustion and fatigue from setting in, allows me to
Well,
recover, and allows me to handle and be resilient to that much intense exercise.
so, have you noticed anything on muscle soreness? Is it
Yeah,
reducing?
for
Yeah.
sure. Recovering quicker and less muscle soreness.
So we do have one clinical trial. It's with like a topical tablet. So we put the tablets in a bathtub in pro athletes, and it significantly reduced delayed onset muscle soreness,
Mhm.
and reduced prevented the rise in creatine kinase, so muscle damage, right? After eccentric, exhaustive exercise in pro soccer players. So I've noticed it from drinking as well, right? And what we know of how hydrogen saturates tissues, drinking a sufficient amount could do the same thing, can get as much as bathing in it. Bathing's just a bit easier to do. You can do it like on a single bath, just wipe away your muscle soreness.
And is it
But
when you bathe in it? I mean, it goes out of the water so quickly. I mean,
yeah, so
is it that it's being absorbed transdermally, or are you
yeah,
inhaling the gas from the room?
it's transdermal. It's
Okay.
transdermal. So you can get it into your tissue at a much smaller concentration than drinking it. But if you drink a lot of it, it reduces muscle soreness. And this is one of the first things I noticed in reduced muscle soreness. So
Mhm.
when I got into hydrogen, started researching it, as I alluded, I had like a health scare. Back then, it sounds like I was a lot like you. I was training between 4 to 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Um, in addition to that, just I pace all the time. I have ADHD. I put in 15 to 20,000 steps a day. I got super sick. I they don't know what happened. They think it was a mystery virus, but I had central nervous system fatigue, so I couldn't do anything explosive. I couldn't get airtime if I tried to jump. Like I couldn't even go like half inch off the ground.
Wow.
My strength wasn't affected. Like my deadlift, my bench press, and my squat were completely unaffected. But in addition, I was anemic, um, and I had sudden onset narcolepsy, and I was sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day.
Whoa.
So and my C-reactive proteins were like 70 times abnormal, 34 milligrams a deciliter. So that's a
Jeez.
marker of inflammation. When the dust settled, I had osteoarthritis in 11 joints,
Whoa.
right? So fast forward to today, um, I'm a candidate, and I'm not going to do it, but I'm a candidate for both a shoulder replacement. This is how far my left shoulder moves,
Wow.
and a hip replacement. And I'm on waiting lists for surgery for my neck, right? And to see an expert because I might need surgery on my back. But I have arthritis in my hands, in my feet, in my knees, just all over it, wreaked havoc. And that's why I ended up getting put on some heavy doses of anti-inflammatories, which led to my ulcers, which led to me developing the tablets and looking for things. Now,
What
today,
say again? What was the original sort of issue that led to all this?
it was they don't know. They think I had a virus,
Okay.
and they couldn't figure out what it was, right? Um, but once I switched to hydrogen, I was still exercising a lot. And I just noticed the reduce in muscle soreness. Now, fast forward, a decade later, just about, and I kickbox still 3 to 4 times a week. I lift weights twice a week. Um, I still walk between 12,000 to 20,000 steps a day. Um, Especially if it's not pouring rain. I usually go for walk through the forest for close to an hour, any day that it's reasonably nice out and that I have the time, which is probably 4 or 5 days a week. Um, I don't have to take anti-inflammatories anymore. Hydrogen hasn't regrown my cartilage. It's not a miracle, but it keeps me limber enough and reduces my pain enough so that I can keep active and keep exercising.
Hmm. Awesome. Okay, so there's a few things I want to circle back to. This idea of antioxidation, of being an antioxidant, versus this distinction you were making as an indirect antioxidant. You did it very well, and I have to say this is an area that I've spent an enormous amount of time writing about and looking at the research about, and is something that almost nobody knows or nobody understands well, even among health practitioners. So I feel it's important to emphasize this more. I'll give a very brief background, which is in the fairly early 1900s, there was a guy named, geez, what was his name? Something Harmon. I'm forgetting his first name, but he became famous for putting out this idea of the free radical theory of aging. Okay, so Harmon's free radical theory of aging, if somebody wants to look that up. And it's got roughly a 100-year history. This is a very old idea. And then was extended by lots and lots of other researchers, maybe most famously Linus Pauling, who was famous for taking huge doses of vitamin C. And the basic gist of this idea was that human beings age and become diseased largely as a result of essentially rusting, like oxidizing, the same way that a piece of metal would rust and become damaged from overexposure to oxidation, to oxidants, to oxygen. The same thing, the same idea is basically happening inside of us at the cellular level. This is what's driving aging and disease. Therefore, free radicals or oxidants or reactive oxygen species are bad and antioxidants are good. Now, what's interesting is since then, in the last 20 years in particular, there's been an enormous amount of research that has thoroughly debunked this idea. There's articles on PubMed that talk, that are literature reviews talking about all the lines of evidence around, one's called, for example, is the free radical theory of aging dead? And it talks about all these layers of evidence that basically show that it's just not true.
Yeah.
That the situation is much more complicated than, hey, we can prevent disease and extend longevity, extend lifespan by giving antioxidants. And there's
And
very
it goes even deeper than that. Like when you look at the research on high dose antioxidant therapy, not only does it not extend lifespan, right, and not work the way it was supposed to work, but it actually shows to increase all-cause mortality, development of diseases,
in many studies, yes.
interfere with a lot of therapies that we need, like such as cancer therapies. Because, and sorry to cut you off, but Like I
Oh,
said
that's
earlier,
great. That's exactly
reductive
what I was going to say.
stress, yeah,
Yeah.
reductive stress, it's just as harmful as oxidative stress.
Yes.
And we need this harmony working between our beneficial oxidative stressors, many of which play important roles in our cells, and our endogenous antioxidants. And if we have too much oxidative stress or too much antioxidants, it basically causes us to not be in this harmonious state, and all this damage rises.
Exactly, exactly. So that, there's, as you said, there's all these lines of evidence where they tested high dose antioxidants of all different sorts. Many of them showed either no benefit of reducing disease or the opposite, that it actually increased risk of certain diseases. But the vast majority, by far 90+% of these studies, even with high dose of powerful antioxidants, showed really no benefit to lifespan or disease prevention. Conversely, another important line of evidence is that things which spike free radicals, reactive oxygen species or oxidants, to a huge degree do have clear disease protective and lifespan extending benefits. And a simple example of this is exercise creates a massive surge of free radicals. So how do we reconcile this data? The way to reconcile it is what you were referring to a minute ago, which is we have actually an internal antioxidant defense system and that's the piece that really matters. It's maintaining that in a robust state so that not so that we have a chronic surplus of antioxidants, which actually causes reductive stress, as you mentioned, which is just as bad um, as having a chronic deficit of antioxidants, but it's to maintain that internal system in a robust, healthy state so that when it needs to neutralize oxidants, it can, but when it needs to spike oxidants in the context of metabolic stress, it can also do that. And those oxidants, it turns out, are not just bad guys, but play an important signaling role in, for example, stimulating mitochondrial growth and biogenesis and in immune health, and they perform lots of healthy functions. They're not just bad guys. But the last thing I'll say is almost all this research has not gotten out. So the vast majority of certainly the general public and practitioners and industry and supplement companies are still pushing this narrative that health is largely about taking more antioxidants, and they're really suppressing, they're either ignorant of or they're suppressing the truth about this
A
antioxidants.
combination of the two, I'd say. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of people are ignorant of it, or are shocked. Even people in the industry and practitioners I've talked to have not known this. And I'll bring up an example. We've known for decades the importance of nitric oxide. Well, that's a free radical,
Hmm.
right? I mean, just that could have debunked everything when we learned how critical nitric oxide levels were for things like vasodilation, right? Um, but a lot in industry also, they make so much on antioxidants,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's such an easy message that everyone has heard the message before.
Yeah.
It takes
They're
tremendous.
leveraging the fact that everybody's been indoctrinated into this mistake, this lie or mistake, however
Yeah,
you want to phrase it. They're leveraging it by putting their marketing on the backs of this mistaken belief that most people have.
and it would take an incredible amount of morality for the people in these positions to know, hey, this isn't free. We're making 100 million a year or $1 billion a year, or whatever, depending on what company you talk to, in this marketing, and everyone gets it. Say we're just going to stop doing this,
Right.
right? Like it's really hard, and especially the law would not be on the side of any CEO that makes that decision, because they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders.
Hmm.
So if they ruin the company, they could be sued, they could lose everything. So the system we have in place is just not designed for companies that are already existing, making a profit off something, to just completely abandon
Hmm.
what they've built their business around.
Exactly.
And that's what
And
that's why
it's an uphill battle also to try to
it,
re-educate people in order to sell your product, which is what I'm trying to do. Instead of just saying, "Hey, this is an antioxidant." It's 60 times more powerful than vitamin C, 75 times more powerful than vitamin E. That's the chronic marketing you hear, but people don't realize that it's total BS.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's unfortunate. And I mean, that's why change comes slowly,
Hmm.
right? But eventually the companies that don't change go the way of the dinosaurs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would, if, just as a simple, practical, readily observable fact, I would bet almost everybody listening to this, if you think back on all the times you took some supposedly super powerful antioxidant that was 50 or 100 times or 500 times more powerful than vitamin C or whatever the marketing was, I would bet that you probably didn't notice benefits that matched up with those claims. That the whatever benefits you noticed, probably you didn't notice any, but that they weren't in any way proportional to the degree to which some antioxidant was supposedly more powerful than other antioxidants like vitamin C. Yeah. So let me ask you this: a couple sort of practical things on hydrogen. Gas versus water. I know you mentioned this briefly before, and I want to ask you about something that I do sometimes, which is sometimes I'll put the hydrogen tablet in water in a bottle that's sealed with a cap on, and then when I open it, I'll actually inhale the gas before I drink the water. I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong, and that's also okay for me to do.
You're not doing anything wrong. And what's funny is I used to do that before I did math.
Uh-huh.
And it's not going to hurt you, but it's way too low
Okay.
to see a benefit because we
I just feel
retain.
bad about letting that gas escape.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and say you do it in like an open glass of water like this
Yeah.
and chug it as soon as the tap rises to the surface, we're retaining 94% of the gas.
Okay.
So only 6% is off gassing. It's a very, very low percentage. And in addition to that, it's shown that inhaling versus when you deliver in water needs at least 100 times the dose of hydrogen
Oh, wow.
see to get the same rise in cellular concentration in the tissues and organs that they get similar rises because drinking gets better into your internal organs, inhaling obviously gets better into your lungs,
Mhm.
for instance. So they have different, pharmacokinetics in how they work, but you need a vastly greater amount of H2 inhaled for it to increase your cellular concentration.
Mhm.
So
Um,
no harm in doing that, but it won't be additionally therapeutic.
okay. Um, I have a couple more questions. One, I actually realized I need to complete this thought around antioxidants. So just speak again. I know you alluded to this earlier, but so we talked about the lack of benefits of all these direct antioxidants. So now explain to people with that context, what is hydrogen doing that is different from that?
So hydrogen is kind of working like exercise, but actually a little bit better in this way. I mean, hydrogen won't grow your muscles like exercise does, but in regulating the redox status, it works a bit better. Same with inflammation. So hydrogen is regulating our internal production of both antioxidants and the beneficial oxidative and nitrosative stressors like H2O2 and nitric oxide, but also our inflammatory response. So our inflammatory response like comes down to cytokine production. So hydrogen will help regulate how many cytokines we're producing. So it's not actually an anti-inflammatory, it regulates our production. And same thing, it's not an antioxidant, but it regulates our production.
Mhm.
So maybe 9 out of 10 times or 19 out of 20 times, we see a like strong reduction in oxidative stress using hydrogen. Because usually a reduction in oxidative stress is good because most people have oxidative damage, too high of oxidative stress. But it will never bring your oxidative stress below like homeostatic redox,
Mhm.
right? In the harmony between the antioxidants and the oxidative stress. So you can't overdo it with hydrogen because it just stops when you get to redox homeostasis.
Mhm.
But in some instances, hydrogen can raise oxidative stress for a beneficial outcome. Like how I mentioned in conjunction with exercise, it spiked the stress higher and recovered quicker. So it was like you exercised harder but recovered faster.
Mhm.
Or in a paper that I was involved on, this is just mice, so I don't want anyone listening to this and thinking that this is a cure for cancer. We have a long, long way to go on this, but in mice, in a model of colorectal cancer, we compared the hydrogen water made with tablets against Fluorocell 5-FU, which is a chemotherapeutic, but also did a combo group of the H2 and the chemotherapeutic together. So in the hydrogen only group and the 5-FU group, they were about similarly effective in reducing collagen content in the cell, reducing tumor size, reducing tumor weight. As expected, hydrogen reduced oxidative stress, right? Whereas 5-FU increased that oxidative stress, and hydrogen improved antioxidant production, whereas 5-FU blunted antioxidant production. So they worked in completely different ways, but had similar results, right, on the cancer cells. What was very interesting and really confirms a lot of what we believed to know and believe to know about hydrogen is the combo group. The hydrogen and 5-FU actually had a greater stress response than the 5-FU alone. So
Mhm.
it increased oxidative stress more than the chemotherapeutic did on its own, and it blunted antioxidant production more than the 5-FU did on its own, which resulted in the cancer basically being killed.
Mhm.
So the collagen content dropped from like 23 and 24% down to like 6%.
Wow.
It dramatically reduced the tumor weight and size even more because hydrogen potentiated the stress attack on the cancer cells of the chemotherapeutic
Mhm.
in this trial. So that was a very, very interesting outcome.
Yeah. Okay. A couple more practical things. And I think you've maybe said this in passing, but just so people understand, can you overdo this? I mean, it's possible to overdo anything. It's possible to you can drink too much water and put yourself in a coma and give yourself brain damage. So
Yeah,
as a general
you
rule, you can overdo
yeah.
everything. But what's the sort of safe range of this?
So we have not found peak in where it levels off, where it plateaus. And this is one interesting thing. I didn't even get into. So hydrogen has a few different ways it works. It works as the mitohormetic effector, kind of the adaptive stress of the mitochondria. It actually improves our microbiome, shown through numerous trials interacting, with their microbiome, which can correct a lot of what's going on in that ebb and flow of H2 gas for people who've not eaten fiber enough their entire life. But it also regulates liver homeostasis.
Hmm.
And this is where we actually need to figure out a bit of what's going on more, because in other tissues, we can track 100% of the hydrogen. It goes in and it goes out. It goes through your skin, you breathe it out. We can map its exit. But in the liver, hydrogen goes in, but a percentage of it doesn't come out. So we know that it's being partially metabolized in the liver in some way. Uh, and we also know that for liver health, hydrogen takes about 10 times higher of a dose in hydrogen water as it does for, say, exercise performance.
Hmm.
So that's very, very interesting. So actually, the tablets, which get the highest concentration of any product on the planet by a landslide, are not even reaching the dose we give mice in the liver. And we've seen some modest benefits in the liver for things like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but it's shown like truly miraculous benefits in mice when you even say double the dose even more. So that would be taking, you know, probably 5 or 6 tablets a day, but we don't have the clinical research to back that
Hmm.
up yet. But what's important to know is we haven't even found the peak of where hydrogen is the most effective for humans. But on the safety side, we know that acute doses of even 10,000 times the volume, which they use in deep sea diving to stop the bends, has no adverse events.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's incredibly safe,
Hmm.
right? We know that for an acute dose, it's not going to hurt us at even 10,000 times a dose. We know that we haven't even found the upper threshold of where it becomes plateaus, because if you look at any adaptive stress or look at exercise, right? If you exercise half an hour a day, it has tremendous benefits. And those benefits don't increase that much if you go to an hour, and then don't really increase at all if you go to 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. But when you get to like 6 or 7, 8 hours a day, it starts going into chronic stress.
Hmm.
And that's when it starts being harmful. So a lot of these safe adaptive stressors have very long plateaus
Yeah.
where the benefits aren't increasing, but it isn't becoming harmful yet.
Right.
Hydrogen, we haven't even found the plateau yet.
Hmm. Yeah. Great way of explaining it. Um, some simple practical things. One is I've noticed, I think I've noticed that when the water that I put it in is colder, it
Oh,
doesn't it doesn't
yeah,
hold as
it
much
doesn't.
hydrogen gas. Is that true?
Yeah. Um, so there's kind of a converse relationship here because cold water actually retains hydrogen better than warmer water, but the reaction kinetics, cold water will slow down disintegration of the tablet and reaction,
Uh-huh.
which means we're retaining less this gas cloud.
So it's giving more
So
time for it to get out of the
the
water.
state.
Yeah.
So how this is working, hydrogen has a saturation point in water of roughly 1.6 milligrams per liter parts per million at room temperature water, right? When you go colder, it can get up to about 1.8. When you go hot water, I think it's down to about 1.4. But that's not how we're delivering the majority of the dose. So the majority of the dose of the hydrogen you're getting from the tablets is in small nanobubbles that aren't saturated, they're quasi-dissolved. They're basically semi-stable in liquid.
Hmm.
Now, basically, to get into a bit of the physics here, is bubbles will not dissipate out of a solution until they're larger than 5 microns, right? The physics change when you go below 5 microns in size. That's the same thing for, particles, say, in the air, right? Which is why if you remember during when the pandemic switched to Omicron, the 6 feet of social distancing no longer worked because Omicron would stay in the air for hours or days,
Hmm.
right? Because it was small enough that it just would linger, it wouldn't fall to the ground. That's the same concept with the bubbles in the water. So we're producing bubbles between about 10 to 30 nanometers in size. So they're much smaller than what can dissipate out. That's why about 94% is retained in the time that the tablet dissolves. However, what happens is those bubbles will coalesce and become larger and larger and larger, right? So over time, more of the bubbles pass 5 microns and dissipate out. So if you put it in cold water and it all of a sudden takes 5 minutes to dissolve instead of 1 minute to dissolve in room temp, that's just more time for those bubbles to have been coalescing and getting bigger, so you don't retain it nearly as
Yeah.
well.
Makes sense. So room temperature is best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Room temperature and chug it down.
Chug
Because
it
higher,
as soon as the tablet finishes dissolving. Don't wait. Chug all that water. Okay, and you need a sufficient amount of water for to give enough
yes.
space for all those bubbles to get the
Yeah.
highest ppms.
So I recommend 500 milliliters, which is, just under 17 ounces. That's the ideal amount of water. Really, the ideal amount of water is what you can chug in a simple go up into about 17 ounces. So if you can't drink 17 ounces by chugging it quickly, it can only drink 12 ounces, then it's best to put in 12 ounces. If you're, say, an older person or really struggle with drinking water, maybe you can only put it in 8 ounces, which is
Mhm.
fine. You can either break a tablet in half and do 8 ounces, twice as often, or put a full tablet in 8 ounces, and do it. So we do have studies like that we haven't put in the ideal 500 liters. In that elderly study, they were putting it in 250 milliliters of water because the people that it was an average age of 77, and they just couldn't reliably chug half a liter of water.
Mhm. Um, maybe the last question or second to last question is what are your you kind of with everything you know, what are your practical recommendations on how much to take, how much you think is optimal, and when to take it? If there are better times of day, whether meaning morning versus night, mid-afternoon slump, before exercise, after exercise, and how many tablets per day?
Sure. So I'll start with the second question first because it's less complex. The best time to take it is on an empty stomach, right? Now, I either take it first thing in the morning or before exercise, or if I do get an afternoon slump, which I don't usually, but if I do, I'll take a second dose to get rid of that afternoon slump. But I try and do it at least 2, 3 hours after I've eaten, especially if you've eaten any fiber, because um, one of one, unless you have dysbiosis, you produce some hydrogen anyways, and you want these peaks and valleys of H2. But two, one of my patents is I've shown how I can create gels and foams by passing H2 through fiber, right? So they have an interesting relationship. These gels and foams are pretty stable. So if you have a full stomach of fiber and carbs, that can retain the H2 gas you just took, and then it's not getting to your cells, like the concentration,
Oh,
right? It's
interesting.
slowly leaking out. So definitely an empty stomach. Good times to take it are definitely first thing in the morning, right before exercise, unless you ate a big meal. I mean, I know I can't exercise if I've just eaten a big meal, right?
Mhm.
I like going into a hard train in a relatively empty stomach, or mid-afternoon slump. Those are all great times. Now, as for the ideal dose,
Do you
that's
real quick? Do you think it's a problem to take it before bed?
it wakes me up.
Okay.
So some people say it doesn't, and they take it before bed. For me, it wakes me up.
Hmm.
Right? And then I end up staying awake for an extra couple hours,
Got it.
which is interesting because we do see some sleep benefits in hydrogen, but typically that's when you take it earlier in the day,
Right.
right? Because we also see these improvements in brain metabolism. So I'd say if people want to try that, be wary that it might wake you up so that you don't fall asleep. But if it doesn't and you find it improves your sleep, taking it closer, by all means, give it a try. Um, Now, as for ideal dose, it really depends on the person and it depends on your stress. If you're, say, in your 20s and incredibly healthy, you might not even need hydrogen every day. Just take it days that you have abnormal stress. Say you ate a really poor meal, or you're traveling, or you stayed up late and got a bad night's sleep, whether you were partying or just had a bad sleep, or you're working out harder than usual. Then take hydrogen, right? Um, for me, I take like 5 a day, but I
Hmm.
have incredible amounts of stress. I travel all the time, and I still am working out like 6 days a week.
Hmm.
So I need it. If I don't have 5 a day, my joints start seizing up and my back goes out, and I can't kickbox anymore. So I need 5 a day. Sometimes I even take 6 or 7. If I'm traveling and had a few drinks the night before, I'll split it and do like 4 in the morning, 3 mid-afternoon. That's when I find I really do get an afternoon slump, right? If I'm traveling and have
Now, when you say this, do you take more than one at a time?
yes,
You
sorry.
take two tablets in a glass of water at the same time? Can you do that?
Yeah, you can. I actually I can chug a lot more water than the average person. I can chug a liter pretty easy, so like 34 ounces. So I'll typically put like, you know, 3 or 4 tablets in a liter
Mm,
and chug it all at once.
wow. I
So
got to try that.
so that I find that actually gives me a pretty big brain boost first thing in the morning,
Okay.
especially.
Um, One thing maybe worth emphasizing before we wrap up on mechanisms is gene expression changes. So just the distinction between when you take this, is it that you get an acute effect for half an hour, 2 hours, versus a more prolonged effect? Can you speak to that?
So we've shown both acute effects in hydrogen, like for instance, those studies after sleep depth, that's a single tablet, shows changes. But hydrogen seems to have protective effects that'll last like a day or two, right? So as it might correct a lot of what's going on or give a slight correction to that acute stress. But say, for instance, if you have chronic stress that's built up over time, it might take a longer time to start seeing these changes. For instance, for metabolic issues, it's seeming to take at least a couple months, if not 3 to 6 months, to start seeing real meaningful impacts to your health.
Mhm. Yeah. Awesome. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have to say, this has become probably my single favorite supplement at this point, just in the way that it facilitates me having such a high activity lifestyle and recovering from it and not suffering from, exhaustion and fatigue when I overdo it. It's really been a game changer for me. The other thing that's cool about it is it's kind of addictive. It's not just like popping a pill or taking some nasty tasting powder. It actually, especially the one that we've created together, actually tastes good. It's fun to drink. It's kind of a fun process to drop it in the water and watch it dissolve and become all bubbly. My kids, I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. They actually ask me for it. They crave it, and they're like, "Can we have a hydrogen water?" And I mean, it's certainly the only supplement that they're asking to do that with. So I find the whole process, everything from the pleasantness of the experience and the like the actual you're enjoying it, you look forward to it, you become addicted to it, to the benefits, everything is just wonderful. I love, for me, I've moved away from all direct antioxidants, and I've tried and tried and tried them over the years, and I'm convinced that maybe there's benefits in certain contexts. For me, as an already healthy person, they only cause negatives. I've never noticed benefits from taking any direct antioxidant. Um, and with this, I see clear benefits. So I've moved away from all the direct antioxidants towards stuff that helps regulate the internal and endogenous antioxidant machinery. I love this supplement. I'm deeply grateful for finding you and your help in helping me to create this supplement. My last question to you is, are there any things you want to say to wrap up? Anything that you feel we've neglected to mention?
No, I want to add to what you said. Actually, it's funny because I just got back, from like the biggest industry trade show, and I had multiple customers, from the industry that came to my booth stressed out because they'd forgotten their hydrogen tablets, right? And of course, they're at meetings, they're staying up late, they're drinking, and they're like, "I forgot to pack,
Mhm.
my hydrogen. Can I grab some samples
Yeah.
off of you for the trip?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And as much as I notice a benefit when I take it, but the benefits are subtle, like we've talked about. It gives clarity, and like improves, afternoon slump, stuff like that. I really notice it when I don't take it.
Yeah.
Like on a couple trips where I have been late, say gotten a 911 phone call of some kind, and throwing my bag together and forgot to grab my hydrogen. I am in pain by the end of the week that I'm gone for, right?
Mhm.
My joints have all seized. I have brain fog, and yeah. So I'll just add, it is addicting because you know when you don't take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say as far as people following your work or anything like that? Any place you want to
Um,
direct them?
sure. I mean, I have a research gate. So I'm not, my full time isn't academia, but I co-author many papers. So I have a research gate. It's just, I think it's Alex T. Tarnava, maybe it's Alex Tarnava. I have alextarnava.com that talks about some of the projects I'm doing, with hydrogen predominantly. Um, my Instagram, I know more people are starting to follow me now, but I post the papers on my Instagram when they come out, but most of the stories is just kind of like restaurants when I'm traveling and stuff like that. So depends if you're interested. I'm interested in that. I'm maybe post a new study every couple months. My research gate is better for that anyways.
Yeah, wonderful. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you again for helping me bring this product to the world. I really appreciate it. You've been a blessing in my life.
Yeah, I'm happy you're jumping on board. I'm obviously quite passionate about it. Glad so many others are too, like you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, this is Ari again. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Alex Tarnava. I wanted to let you know that my new brand, Human Optimization, has officially launched, and the first product in our product line is, as you might have guessed, based on this episode, molecular hydrogen. This is the package for the new supplement, for our new molecular hydrogen supplement. It's wonderful. It's got the highest ppms of any hydrogen tablet on the market, up to 12 ppms per glass, which is much, much higher than not only many competitors, but also higher, of course, than hydrogen water machines and bottles and things like that, much higher. It's also flavored. So it has natural flavoring in it. It's actually pleasant to drink. It tastes good. This has been a huge hit, not only with my personal family, with my wife, with my kids even. My kids crave it and love it because it's actually fun to drink. And drop it in a glass of water and it fizzes up. It's kind of, I say it's the most fun supplement ever to take. Not that supplements in general are fun, but this one happens to be, and it tastes pleasant. It's actually an enjoyable process. More importantly, it actually works. This is one of the few supplements that almost across the board, people truly feel working. They noticed a boost in their energy. They noticed a boost in their brain function, in their mood when they normally would be maybe getting tired, having that afternoon slump. This gives them a boost. Where I personally notice it most is on days where I do a ton of exercise. This helps me recover faster. It helps me sleep deeper and feel better the following day, and even boost my heart rate variability scores the following morning. So I am, as you heard in this episode, I'm an absolute believer in this supplement. That's why I went out and made my own molecular hydrogen supplement and brought it to the market under my new brand. It's because I'm a believer. And I didn't start out that way. I was a skeptic for, I want to say, at least 6 or 7 years, maybe more. When I would see little bits of information on hydrogen water, I thought it was a gimmick. I thought it was another one of these structured water, clustered water, alkaline water types of things that just doesn't have any scientific support. And the body of scientific literature has grown massively in the last few years. And to the point where I got interested enough to actually try it, and I noticed a benefit. And I'm not somebody who's particularly sensitive to supplements. Most supplements, I don't notice anything subjectively. And I'm not susceptible to the placebo effect because I'm going into it sort of expecting not to notice an effect. And I, with an attitude of skepticism saying, prove to me that there actually truly is a genuine effect of this supplement beyond just expectations and placebo effects. So I go into it with that attitude of skepticism, and I have absolutely been massively pleasantly surprised with hydrogen. My wife has as well, and my parents have as well. And almost everybody that I know that I've gifted this product to and asked them to try and report back on their experiences, almost across the board without exception, people report they notice an effect, they feel a benefit from it, and they really love taking it. Also good news, it's not expensive. I bought this in massive bulk supply so that I could bring the prices down and extend that to you guys. So I'm bringing this amazing product to the market at a very, very affordable price. I hope that you will give it a shot. It truly is a great product. You have nothing to lose. It's pleasant to drink, so you don't have really any downside. And I hope you'll try it out and enjoy the benefits for yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And if you want to try this out, you can go to humanoptimization.com, go to the store and choose whether you want 1 or 3 or the subscribe and save. And I will see you in next week's podcast episode.